Throw away because I can't let anyone in my real life find this. I'm shaking as I type because I never thought I would be one of those wives you read about here. But I am. I ruined my marriage, and now I'm sitting here with a baby that my husband refuses to acknowledge, wondering how my life ended up in pieces. My name is Sarah, I'm 35 years old, and I've been married to my husband Ethan, who is 37, for 10 years. On the outside, we looked like a stable couple. We had a nice home, steady jobs, supportive families. People envied us, and I would smile, pretending everything was fine, when deep down something in me felt hollow. Ethan was a good man, responsible, loyal, hardworking. But his career demanded so much from him. He often worked late, traveled for days, and when he was home, he was drained. Our marriage slowly turned into routine. Dinner, small talk, sleep. The intimacy faded. I told myself this was what marriage eventually became, comfort instead of passion. But I missed being wanted. I missed laughter, the butterflies, the thrill. That's when Ryan entered my life. He was my coworker, 34, charismatic, funny, always making everyone in the office laugh. At first, it was harmless. He'd compliment me on little things, my earrings, a new dress, even the way I presented at meetings. I brushed it off, but secretly, it gave me a rush. I started looking forward to work, to his jokes, to the way he listened to me when I vented about stress. He noticed details Ethan no longer seemed to. When you've been starved of attention, the smallest crumbs feel like a feast. I convinced myself it was just friendship. But I knew I was lying. The shift happened one night after a work event. We had drinks, and somehow I ended up staying later than I should have. The office was empty except for us. We were talking about movies when the conversation shifted. The air got heavier, and suddenly, Ryan leaned in and kissed me. My brain screamed no, but my body didn't move away. I kissed him back. That was the first step over the line, and once you take it, it gets easier to keep walking down the wrong path. That night, I told myself it was a mistake, that I'd stop it. But the next day, when he messaged me asking if I wanted to see him again, I didn't say no. The affair began. Hotels during lunch breaks. His apartment when his roommate was out. Once, even in the office after hours. Every time, I promised myself it would be the last. Every time, guilt clawed at me, but I craved him like an addiction. Ryan made me feel alive in a way Ethan hadn't in years. But here's the thing I didn't realize. Excitement and lust aren't love. They're temporary highs. And I was gambling my marriage for them. Months went by like this. I became an expert liar. I told Ethan I was working late when I was with Ryan. I deleted messages, cleared call logs, even changed Ryan's contact name to Laura in my phone. Each lie buried me deeper, but I thought I was in control. I thought I could have both my husband and my affair. I couldn't have been more wrong. One morning, I noticed I was late. A week, then 2. My stomach churned with dread as I bought a pregnancy test. I sat in the bathroom, staring at those 2 pink lines, my heart pounding. I whispered to myself, it's Ethan's. It has to be Ethan's. But deep down I knew. We hadn't been intimate in weeks. Ryan and I, on the other hand, I felt like my world collapsed. I couldn't tell Ryan. He'd panic and vanish. I couldn't tell Ethan. He'd divorce me on the spot. So I did the only thing I thought I could. I stayed quiet. I smiled, pretended everything was fine, and prayed. I told myself maybe, just maybe, the baby would look like Ethan. Maybe fate would protect me. But fate doesn't protect liars. It punishes them. During the pregnancy, Ethan was surprisingly attentive. He cooked, cleaned, drove me to appointments, even rubbed my swollen feet. Every time he did something kind, guilt stabbed me harder. Here was a man who was trying, who loved me, and I was carrying another man's child inside me. Sometimes I wanted to confess, to fall on my knees and beg for forgiveness. But then I'd imagine his face, the devastation, and I'd swallow the words. I thought I was hiding it well, but Ethan's eyes told me otherwise. He started watching me more closely. He'd ask subtle questions. Was work busy today? Why were you late? Who were you texting? I'd laugh them off, but inside I panicked. He didn't fight me.
He didn't accuse me.
He just observed, like a man gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. It made my skin crawl because I realized something terrifying. Ethan already knew. He just hadn't confronted me yet. I spent those months in a haze of fear. Every kick from the baby reminded me of the truth I couldn't hide forever. Every kind gesture from Ethan made me hate myself more. I distanced myself from Ryan, telling him I needed space. He grew irritated, calling me selfish. I didn't care. I couldn't handle both worlds colliding. Still, I clung to hope. Hope that maybe I'd deliver. Ethan would hold the baby, and love would blind him from the truth. Hope that the nightmare I had created wouldn't swallow me whole. But deep down, I knew the storm was coming. And when it arrived, it would destroy everything. The day of delivery came faster than I expected, though in reality, it was 9 long months of me living in fear. I went into labor on a rainy Thursday evening. Ethan drove me to the hospital, calm but quiet. He held my hand during the contractions, wiped my forehead, and whispered reassurances. In those hours, I almost believed everything could still be okay. Maybe the baby would look like him. Maybe my nightmare would end, and I'd wake up to forgiveness instead of ruin. When our son was born, I sobbed uncontrollably. He was beautiful, tiny, perfect, with a full head of dark hair. I wanted so badly to believe he was Ethan's. I looked up at my husband, hoping for a smile, some sign of relief. But his face was stone. He didn't move closer. He didn't reach for the baby. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching me like a stranger. My mother and his mother were overjoyed, hovering around me, cooing at the baby. But Ethan's distance cut through my heart. Then the nurse came in with a clipboard. "Mr. Campbell, we'll need you to fill out the birth certificate." He didn't even hesitate. His voice was firm, cold. "I'll sign it after the DNA test proves he's mine." The air in the room froze. I felt like someone had ripped the floor out from under me. My head snapped toward him, my mouth falling open. "Ethan, what are you saying?" His eyes met mine with a sharpness that made my blood run cold. "I'm saying I know you cheated." The room erupted. My mother gasped. His mother scolded him, telling him not to say such cruel things after I'd just given birth. But Ethan didn't flinch. His gaze was locked on me, and for the first time, I saw just how much he had been holding in. I shook my head, clutching the baby closer to my chest. No, Ethan, I didn't." He cut me off, his voice slicing through the chaos. "Then should I call Ryan? Should I ask him to come here and explain it to everyone?" I swear my heart stopped. My whole body jolted like I had been electrocuted. He knew. Not just suspected, he knew. My lips trembled as tears filled my eyes. I don't know what you're talking about." But Ethan wasn't done. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. My stomach dropped because I already knew what it was. He opened it slowly, deliberately. "Then explain this." It was a printed screenshot of a message I had sent Ryan months ago. "My husband should never know about you and me. I don't want anything to do with you anymore." I felt like vomiting. My mother covered her mouth in shock. His mother's face twisted in disgust. And Ethan just stood there, holding that piece of paper like a weapon. "How did you—" My voice cracked, barely a whisper. "Ryan gave it to me," Ethan said simply, his tone laced with finality. That was the moment everything crumbled. I sobbed uncontrollably, clutching the baby tighter, as if I could hide behind him. My tears dripped onto his tiny blanket. I muttered through broken sobs. "He said no one would ever know, he promised." But Ethan wasn't moved. His voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "So you did sleep with him? You carried his child?" I shook my head frantically, denying it even though the evidence was clear. No, Ethan, it wasn't like that, please." But he just looked at me with dead eyes. I knew for 4 months. I waited for this day. For the truth to be born with him. The words cut deeper than knives. He had known. All this time, he had known. Every kind gesture, every smile, every hand he held, it was all for the baby's sake, not for me. He had been waiting for proof. I looked at him, broken, begging. "Ethan, please, we can fix this." Please don't give up on us. He turned away slightly, his jaw clenched. If the baby is mine, I'll be his father. If not, I'm done. With both of you. My mother begged him to stop, to think of the child. His mother shook her head, furious at me, calling me careless, selfish. The room was spinning. I felt like I was drowning in shame, regret, and fear. But Ethan didn't care about the chaos. He looked back at me one last time. After you're discharged, go with your mother. You're not coming back to my house. I cried harder than I ever had in my life. The man I loved, the man I betrayed, had just ended our marriage in a hospital room. And the worst part?
He was right to.
That night, lying in the hospital bed, holding my son, I felt the crushing weight of what I had done. I had destroyed everything. My marriage, my husband's trust, my family's respect, my child's future, and I couldn't take any of it back. Leaving the hospital felt like walking out of one life and straight into another, except the new one was shattered, empty, and suffocating. Ethan didn't come to pick me up. My mother did. She carried my bag while I held the baby in my arms, my face burning with shame as the nurses whispered and exchanged looks. I knew they had all seen what happened. I was the woman whose husband refused to sign the birth certificate. The woman whose betrayal had been laid bare in a delivery room. Back at my mother's house, I sat in my childhood bedroom, rocking my newborn son, and cried silently into his blanket. I wanted to love him purely, but every time I looked at his tiny face, guilt and dread surged through me. He was innocent, yet he was living proof of my betrayal. And Ethan's words echoed relentlessly in my head. If the baby is mine, I'll be his father. If not, I'm done. 2 weeks later, the DNA test results arrived. I didn't want to open the envelope, but Ethan showed up at my mother's house, envelope in hand, his face expressionless. He didn't even look at me when he handed it to her. Read it out loud, he told my mother, his voice cold. My hands shook as she unfolded the paper. Her lips trembled as she whispered the words, "Chances of paternity, 0%. Ethan Campbell is not the father." The room fell into silence, except for the soft whimper of my baby. My mother gasped and sat down, holding her head in her hands. Ethan's mother, who had come with him, just stared at me like I was filth. I felt my chest tighten until I could barely breathe. It was official. The last shred of hope I had clung to was gone. Ethan was not the father. My marriage was over. I reached out weakly. "Ethan, please, we can find a way, please." He stepped back, his eyes burning with disgust. "Don't. You made your choice when you opened your legs for him. Don't you dare ask me to pick up the pieces." I broke down, sobbing, begging him to forgive me, to at least hold the baby once. But he refused. He turned to his mother and said, "Let's go." Before leaving, his mother glanced at me with eyes full of disappointment. "You destroyed my son, Sarah. And you took away a grandchild I thought was mine." Her words cut deeper than any knife. In the weeks that followed, Ethan filed for divorce on grounds of adultery. I tried to plead with him, but he wouldn't even respond to my calls or texts. He cut off my credit cards, froze our joint accounts, and made it clear through his lawyer that I wasn't welcome in the house we had shared. The humiliation didn't end there. Ryan, the real father, disappeared. He stopped answering my calls, blocked me on social media, and when I confronted him at his workplace, he told me coldly that he wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. He said he had never wanted baggage. I stood in the parking lot crying, clutching my son to my chest, realizing just how disposable I had been to him. When the court hearings began, the shame intensified. Everything came out in public. My affair, the messages I had sent, the proof Ethan had collected. His lawyer painted me as reckless, selfish, and manipulative, and I had no defense. The judge looked at me with thinly veiled disgust as Ethan's lawyer held up the messages between me and Ryan. "Your Honor," he said, "this woman deceived my client for months, carried another man's child, and now expects him to shoulder responsibility that does not belong to him." I sat there, silent tears streaming down my face. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to explain. I said I had felt neglected, that Ethan was always busy with work, that I had been lonely. My voice shook as I said, I never meant to hurt him. I was weak. Ethan's lawyer didn't hold back. So your solution to loneliness was to betray your husband and bring another man's child into his home? Do you expect this court to reward your weakness? I had no answer. My excuses sounded hollow even to my own ears. The worst moment came when I broke down on the stand, sobbing, and the words slipped out. I just wanted to feel alive again, to feel desired, and I made the worst mistake of my life chasing that. The courtroom went silent. Even the judge's expression hardened with contempt. I wanted to vanish, to disappear into the floor. Ethan sat there unmoving, his jaw clenched. He didn't look at me once. The divorce was granted. Half of our assets were split, but I felt like I had lost everything. Because I had. Ethan was gone. Our marriage was gone. And the only man who had truly loved me now looked at me like I was poison. When I returned home that night, holding my son, I whispered through tears, holding my baby close. It's just you and me now. But deep inside, I knew the truth. I had destroyed not only my marriage but also the life my son could have had with a loving father. And no matter how many times I told myself he was innocent, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had cursed him before he was even born. When the judge's gavel came down and declared the marriage dissolved, it didn't feel real at first. 10 years of my life, gone in seconds. I sat frozen in that courtroom, numb, as Ethan walked out without a single glance back. My lawyer put a hand on my shoulder, but I couldn't even process his words. All I heard was the echo. Marriage dissolved. Assets split. Case closed. That night, I went back to my mother's house. I laid my son in his crib and stared at him for hours. His tiny chest rising and falling, his soft little hands curling in his sleep. He was innocent, and yet he was the reason everything came crashing down. I hated myself for even thinking it. It wasn't his fault. It was mine. I was the one who opened the door to Ryan. I was the one who betrayed Ethan. My son was simply the living proof of my weakness. Weeks turned into months. I tried to adjust to single motherhood. I woke up every 2 hours for feedings, changed diapers, went to work exhausted, and came home to endless chores. There was no Ethan to lean on, no husband to share the load. Sometimes I caught myself wishing he would knock on the door, hold me, tell me he forgave me. But that knock never came. Instead, I heard whispers. Friends who stopped calling. Neighbors who looked at me differently. Even family gatherings were tense. My relatives showed polite smiles, but I could feel their judgment. Everyone knew what I had done. Everyone knew I had lost everything because I couldn't control myself. Ryan was gone completely. He didn't just block me, he left the company, moved to another city, and cut all ties. I heard through a coworker that he had a new girlfriend, someone younger, and that he pretended like nothing had ever happened. Meanwhile, I was left with the baby, the stairs, and the wreckage. My mother tried to support me, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She loved me, but she couldn't understand me. And I couldn't explain it. How do you explain destroying everything for a fleeting fling? How do you justify throwing away a faithful husband for a moment of weakness? There are no answers that don't sound pathetic. The hardest part was hearing that Ethan had moved on. A mutual friend mentioned he was dating again, someone kind, someone steady, someone who deserved him. I should have been happy for him, but I wasn't. I was jealous. Not because I still deserved him, but because I knew she was getting the version of him I destroyed. A good man. A loyal man. A man I would never have again. At night, when the baby cried and I held him close, I would whisper apologies into his hair. I'm sorry I ruined your life before it began. I'm sorry you don't have a father. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. Sometimes I cried so hard I thought I'd wake him, but he just nestled against me, peaceful in ways I no longer knew how to be. I think about Ethan every day, about how his eyes looked that day in the hospital, cold, sharp, filled with the hurt I caused. I replay our last conversations, wishing I had chosen differently. Wishing I had stopped myself that night Ryan first kissed me. Wishing I had fought for my marriage instead of chasing a cheap thrill. But wishes don't change reality. The reality is that I destroyed my marriage. I broke my husband's trust. I gave birth to another man's child and expected my husband to raise him. And now I live with the weight of those choices. Sometimes I wonder what will happen when my son is old enough to ask questions. What will I say when he asks why he doesn't have a dad like other kids? Do I lie? Do I tell him the truth, that his mother's selfishness cost him a father? How do you look a child in the eyes and confess that you ruined his life before he even had a chance to live it? I don't know the answer. All I know is this: I loved Ethan. Truly, deeply. But I let loneliness and desire cloud my judgment. And now I am paying the price every single day. Ethan has moved on. Ryan has vanished. My family tolerates me, but doesn't admire me. My friends are gone. And I am left here, raising a son who deserves so much more than the broken mother he got. This is my confession. I cheated on my husband, carried another man's child, and destroyed the only life I ever wanted. My husband refuses to sign the birth certificate. He refuses to look at me. And he is right to. I can't blame him. I can only blame myself. And that's the truth I will carry to my grave.